All right. So we should be going live here in a minute. Don't pay any attention to the information that you saw on that window there. You really need to be a little more careful with that. Let me sign out of my nonsense here, my non-stream related nonsense. Okay, it looks like YouTube has sent me a notification and it should be live now. Okay, so welcome everybody. I see that there's at least a couple people watching. Okay, so today we have a very productive day scheduled. Maybe another cram day. We are going over um, informative speeches and also outlining. So let's go ahead and start with outlining. So in your workbook, please find skeletal outline for the informative speech. Now, in my workbook, which is the instructor's version, it appears on page 55. But you know, if any of you have any experience in an elementary school classroom as a student, or perhaps as a teacher, I mean, some of you um, might be taking classes for master's credit. You would know that sometimes the teacher's version is different from the student version. So it may not be on page 55 for you, but there is definitely skeletal outline for the informative speech in your workbook. Okay. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and give you just a couple seconds. Anyone on? I am on. Is there some kind of problem with the audio? It doesn't seem like it. Let me bring up my broadcaster. No? Okay. Maybe she was just asking if any other students were on. Anywho, um, so in our workbook, please find the skeletal outline for the informative speech. We're going to go over it just a little bit. Please do keep in mind that this is just kind of outlining in itself is kind of an art form, just like anything else in this course, really. It's there's not a lot of things that are set in stone, but there are like movements or how do I want to describe this here? Big ideas that you should always communicate in your outline, and exactly how much you communicate is really kind of up to you. But there's going to be some things that you just need to do. And one of those things is that you need to provide a title. Oh, it's still underlined. You need to provide a title for your speech. All right. Now that should be at the top of your outline. So even though I don't really care if it's centered or anything like that, but you need to have a title for your speech. And it needs to be at the top. It should be the first thing. If I'm reading your outline, it should be the first thing that I see, except for perhaps your name, and general like class header type stuff if you choose to put that in there. One of the nice perks of being in an online class is that I always know who turns their stuff in because I always have access to your information. It's always associated with your Ball State account, so I can't get things disorganized. But anyway, the point is, title for your speech at the top, and it is whatever you want it to be. And ironically enough, this is one of the things that you'll tell me, but the class will probably never know. But nonetheless, you should get in that habit of titling your speech because, and you know, this might seem like a long shot, but if you need to put this kind of speech or speech writing on your resume, this is what you need to put on there. You know, I did, you know, Captain Marvel, the life and times of, oh gosh, Stan Lee. Then this is one way that they can tell that this outline is associated with that presentation. So it's a good habit to get into. And again, as a skills-based class, we're all about building good habits. Okay. So anyway, so put your title of the speech on there. It's a good habit to get into. The next is that you want to provide a general purpose for your speech. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a solid, and that means to give you a favor. And that is to say that because this is an informative speech, your general purpose is to inform the audience about topic. Now, there's also going to be something that looks similar in your book, and you're like, well, it says general purpose here is just to inform on your skeletal outline. I guess I'm a little more persnickety in that when we get to the next part of your outline, which is a specific purpose, I would like for you to write something like, to inform my class audience about topic, and then specific, and then here you would put there's like a you would, this is, we're trying to write this as a general form here, but you would write to inform my class audience about topic in these areas. Okay, and then of course you would list them out. So in other words, you're listing out all of the important things that you think you're going to cover in your speech, if that makes any sense. All right. Next, you want in your outline, you want an introduction. Right? Now, this is the part of the outline where you should like bold and let me know that you are moving on to like the actual outline part. This stuff up here is just kind of like your header, or I guess this part isn't really important, but this here is like your header. I'm going to put this in parentheses here, header type stuff. All right, so I don't really care where this is located. If it's just like this, like you literally wrote it out, like I've written it out here, or if you have it set up so that the title is centered, like this, or maybe you put this over here and this over here, and trying to differentiate it out a little bit visually. Doesn't matter to me. This is just something that you stick at the top of your speech. But now we're into the actual outline, right? And your introduction has to do several very specific things. And we haven't really talked about those things much because we haven't had a formal speech yet. But here we go. So your introduction has 5 parts to it. All right. Part 1, and again, I don't care if you use Roman numerals. You could also use number 1. You could also use letter A. Doesn't matter to me. I'm going to go ahead and stick with Roman numerals because that's what's in your book. But anyway, so you would have what we call an attention getter. Whoa, 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 whoa. Come on, buddy. Yeah, there we go. And sometimes, as you notice here, this little button turned on in Word. This means that it's automatically recognizing that I'm starting an outline, so that's very convenient and easy for you to understand. Okay, not to understand. What am I talking about? It's very easy and convenient for you to write. Sometimes I don't even know if I understand. Anyway, attention getter. An attention getter is something that the purpose is to grab your audience's attention, but also by creating investment in the topic. Oh boy, typing is terrible today. Investment in the topic. So there's a couple ways you can do that, and I'm just going to kind of list them out here. I guess you know what, we can stay in outline mode. So maybe you have a startling statistic, and that's going to be the first thing that you have to do your attention getter. Because remember, the thing that makes outlines work, maybe I should put this up here somewhere before we talk about the outlines. The thing about outlining is if it describes visually how your ideas are related to one another, particularly how they are subordinated. Okay, so that means how you can tell. Subordinated means how you can tell what ideas are supporting what other things. So my attention getter is several things in this case, because you have a little a here. And so maybe our first one is a startling statistic, which is fairly self-descriptive. You found something during research. During research, you found something alarming in terms of information that talks about your topic. So maybe I found that 90% of this class doesn't know who Stan Lee is, and that is how I'm going to try to grab your attention and say, Stan Lee is an icon, and 90% of you don't know who he is. So I would like to get you invested in this speech by explaining how the topic relates to the personal lives of the audience. So after I say, 90% of you don't know who Stan Lee is, I might go on to say, which is unbelievable, not because I'm sure almost all of you have been influenced by his work. All right. If any of you have seen any of the X-Men movies, then you have been influenced and enjoyed the works of Stan Lee. Right. So that was my way of trying to get the topic or get the topic related to the personal lives of the audience. Another thing that you can do, just generally in terms of attention getter, is to tell an anecdote, which is really just a short story that you believe is a good example of your topic. Or maybe not example of your topic, or maybe that it relates to a broader theme of your speech. Okay, so maybe your informative speech is about the life and times of Stan Lee. So maybe you tell a brief anecdote about how he started his comic book universe, right? And that alone might be enough to build audience attention. Okay, that's only one of the 5 jobs that the introduction does. I promise the rest of it isn't really all that scary. The next part is something we call the thesis statement. Now, even though this is an informative speech and you're not trying to persuade anybody, again, you're not trying to get people to change their behavior or change their beliefs, because that would be persuasive. Instead, your thesis statement will be, today, my goal is to inform you about, and guess what you can use? You can go ahead and use whatever you wrote in your specific purpose up here. So you can copy and paste your specific purpose. All right. And that's it for that part. Job 3 of your introduction is statement of importance. Now, already you can see that some of this stuff is going to look kind of, repetitive. Especially because up here in this attention getter, one of the things that you can do to build audience interest is explain how the topic relates to the personal lives of the audience. So really, if you've done that up here, don't need to do that again down here. So don't rack your brain with 2 reasons why the audience needs to listen to your topic. If you've already done it once, then you've already done this. And this is what I was talking about with outlining being an art form. Sometimes in doing one thing, like particularly the attention getter, you end up doing some of the other parts of the introduction. So don't worry about finding, 5 different parts to do if you already feel like you've done or achieved one. But let's say, for example, that you just use a startling statistic in your attention getter, and you never did relate your audience to the topic. Well, this is what you're going to do here. Statement of importance, relate the topic to your audience, particularly their personal lives. Personal lives, if possible. Okay, so if you hadn't done that up here for your attention getter, you got to do it at some point, and now is the time to do it. The next part is statement of credibility. Every speech you should start with a statement of credibility. Not necessarily start, but you know what I mean. In the introduction, you want to go over your statement of credibility, which means explain your interest in the topic, how long you researched it, and why you believe you are qualified to speak. Now, for a classroom assignment like this, that a lot of you are doing, like TV shows and stuff, your statement of credibility can be as simple as something like, I watched Star Trek for 15 years, all of the original episodes, plus that cute little Enterprise thing they had after Star Trek The Next Generation. And I also researched this topic for 3 weeks. I believe that my experience as an audience member of Star Trek and also as someone who's done some research over a period of time, that I am qualified to explain to you about the importance of Star Trek in our pop culture. That's it. That's all you need. And it can be that simple. Now, as you grow, as you get more and more experience in professional work, your statements of credibility will sound cooler. Like, I've taught debate for 17 years, and as a result of my personal experience coaching debate for that long and coaching several national award-winning teams, I believe that I can tell you how you too can be a very persuasive person. Right? Maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that sounds a little better, but it's still the same. It's still the same basic pattern. You explain your interest in the topic, how long you researched it, grammatical mistake there, and why you believe you're qualified. Right? It always follows the same pattern. Even if it's like, I researched this for class for 3 weeks. That's totally fine, totally legit. Again, you're building good habits here. Okay. So preview. And this is all that it is that you list out the main points. Okay, so if you have 3 main points, then you would have just a list of them. Ooh, main pint. Main point. Point. Okay. So that would be a 3-point main speech. Maybe you only have 2 main points. Again, I'm not requiring, everything we do here is based on the time it takes to say. All right. It is not based on how long it is in terms of word count, page count, or how many main points you have. You will probably need more than 1 main point. Okay. And what is a main point? It's basically a statement you want your audience to remember. So a main point is some kind of probably a fact that you want your audience to remember after your speech is done. So for example, one of my main points for tonight might be, here are one of my main points is the 5 parts of an introduction, right? Because that's one of the things that I want you to remember. And everything else related to that is going to be this kind of supporting material. I almost said filler material. It's not. It's not filler. Okay, now so these are the 5 jobs of the introduction. After that, let's go ahead and get out of outline mode. You're talking about this transition to body. So what that says is, or what that means is, your job after the introduction is to say something like, to begin with, first, moving to my first main point, something like that. So you list out your main points, and then you just come to your transition to begin with, right? Or you say first, moving to my first main point. These transitions should be ordinal, which means ordinal transitions, which means they give an explicit reference to where you are in your speech. So people know that you're on your first main point because you told them explicitly, either saying, moving to my first main point, or first, or to begin with. Everything here tells you that we're on the very first thing that you want to talk about. Okay. And then we move on to the next page. of your skeletal outline. And again, this is all in your workbook as well. I mean, it's not explained out like on this Word document here. I will post this Word document, by the way, at the end of the broadcast. But next we move on to the body. And again, this is where you take out the bold and say body. Okay. And here we have our first main point. All right. So again, a main point, statement of what you want your audience member. Okay. And then to support that main point, you have what we call subpoints, which and subpoints are nothing more than facts that you feel will create an impact on your audience. Particularly, I don't really want to do that. Okay, maybe not. Particularly, that will help them remember. Okay. So subpoints are just facts. So maybe my main point one is that Stan Lee is a comic book icon. And my sub point is that he has created I don't even know the number, I'm going to make it up, 56 separate comic book characters that all of us have been exposed to at some point in our lives. Okay? That would be a fact that I think will create an impact. In this case, I want to create the impact that you are impressed with Stan Lee. So maybe that will help you remember that Stan Lee is an icon in our culture. Okay. Now here in your outline, it says it has like 2 subpoints, and then it goes on to like subpoints. So I'm going to just do one subpoint and then subpoint. So you can tell here that subpoints are additional supporting facts that you got from the same source as the subpoint. Okay. So maybe in my research that I had done for this speech, I also found out that one of his creations was the X-Men, which was at the time the most popular, at the time of the speech, the most popular X-Men. And so that sub-point about X-Men being created by Stan Lee and being really popular would be a sub-point. But again, what exactly is a sub-point and a sub-point is kind of up to you guys. It really is. What the important thing is to remember is that it describes visually how your ideas are related to one another. So the important thing is that this information here doesn't get mixed up, say, with this other totally different main idea, right? So maybe we had 2 things we wanted our audience to remember. One is that Stan Lee is a cultural icon, and the other one is that Marvel Comics are good for the economy, right? These 2 subpoints about the things that Stan Lee has created and how popular his creations are have nothing to do with how many comics that Marvel sells, or has nothing to do with anything about the business aspect of Stan Lee's Marvel Comics. Okay? So that's why you outline. It helps you keep these ideas organized. So things that are about Stan Lee being really cool and popular come up here under this main point, and other things about his business acumen are filed under your second main point. Does it matter which order they go in at the end of the day? No, it doesn't. But it does matter if you have things that make sense associated with one another. I hope that helps you out. So you'd have your second main point. You'd have at least one subpoint, because every main point needs at least one fact to support it. And then so on. So some of you, again, might have 2 main points. You might have 4 main points. You might have 3 main points. Again, it's up to you and how much time. I think my cat's scratching my chair here. How much time you have in your speech. Okay. And if any of you have any questions, please do interrupt me. Okay, but this is going to be an important, this next part is important as well. And I got a little ahead of myself, and I do apologize. Between main points. Ooh. Like how that came out, but between main points, you need a transition. So what is a transition? A transition consists of two parts, right? Transitions consist of two parts. One is what we call an internal summary. Ooh. And the other is an internal preview. Or in layman's terms, you tell them what you just got done telling them. I write it out with all these apostrophes here. Then you tell them what you are about to tell them. So if my two main points were Stan Lee is a cultural icon, and the second main point was Marvel Comics are an important part of our economy, I would say something like, well, I gotta tell him what I gotta tell you what I just got done telling you. So I would say, now that we've explored Stan Lee's iconic status in American culture, let us now talk about Stan Lee's Marvel Comics impact on our economy. And then I would say whatever the statement is here. So even though it is repetitive. This is something as an aside here. It's called the didactic method. Uses repetition, or you use repetition to increase audience retention of the key ideas. Teachers use this all the time, and oftentimes it's described as boring. And part of that is because, honestly, when we prepare for an hour class, we might spend maybe an hour and a half preparing for an hour-long class. And that's more time than the class takes, yes. But the best speakers for like a 10-minute presentation will spend an hour preparing for their 10-minute speech. That is like that is like 10 times or 6 times, if I do the math right, the amount of time that a teacher would use. So teachers, I'm going to include myself in this, we are very boring because we don't have enough time, or we don't take enough time to make these kinds of things interesting. There is an artful way to do this repetition using synonyms, using fun little jokes, or using mnemonic devices that make this less, it's still repetitive, it's still repetition, but it makes it less, it makes it less didactic, I guess. Because didactic also means repetitive to the point of being. But anyway, so take your time in trying to figure out what these internal summaries and internal previews should do. I mean, don't agonize over it, because you really can just tell them what you just got done telling them, and then tell them what you're going to tell them. But don't try to increase some variety in there. Use some synonyms, maybe reword the phrases or key phrases in a slightly different way, so that it's still the same ideas, the same repetition, but it doesn't sound like you're quoting from yourself a lot. Okay. So anyway, so between this is actually the main pattern of the speech. You do this however many times for every main point that you've got. So if you've got 2 main points, after this, you're pretty much done. So let's assume that we do have a 2 main point speech, and we move on to the last part of your outline / the last part of your speech, which is the conclusion. Right? You'd also put this to the side. You'd bold it. Right? And the conclusion does just 2 things. All right? It has a summary and outline it. Oh, that's going to do that to me. Sometimes the auto outline fails you. So I'm going to go manual now. So and then the conclusion, you have 2 main ideas, 2 main things you need to do. Summary of main points, which means you just list them. So it's basically like the preview in your introduction. All right, you would list main point 1, point 2, and you would just restate them, really. Just list them, restate them. And then the second job is what we call the closing statement. End on a note that you feel will increase audience attention, or increase audience retention, sorry. In other words, they will remember your key idea or ideas from the speech. So how exactly do you do that? And this is where, again, a lot of art comes in. You could revisit your startling statistic by saying something like, and, I started this speech by saying 90% of people don't know who Stan Lee is. So now that I'm done with this speech, you are part of that elite 10% that knows who Stan Lee is. So go ahead and brag about it to all of your friends. And especially that last part, it also comes with another idea that you want to, necessarily that you want to do, but is another method of creating a good closing statement, is find a reason why the audience is better off for listening. Okay, so in this case, or in this example that I had, I kind of just said everybody's better off because you are now part of an elite group, and you can brag about it to your friends. And honestly, sometimes that's a lot of the reason why people offer in this particular class what the method that they use for their closing statements, simply because of the topics we have. Now that we learn about these obscure TV shows, we're part of a new audience for things that we can tell our friends about and brag about and offer. Another method is to invite your audience to learn more. Okay. Now this is different from telling your audience to learn more. Okay. And this might be a little bit difficult to explain. Saying something like, and now that you've learned all of this about Stan Lee, maybe the next time you pick up a Marvel comic, you will understand more about it. And I encourage you to seek out those opportunities. It's a lot different from saying something like, and now that we know that Stan Lee is a cultural icon, I hope that you change your attitude about the latest X-Men movies and see that they are works of art. One of them is just an invitation to get more involved in the topic. The other one is telling your audience exactly what to think, right? So in your invitation to your audience, do not make the mistake of telling your audience what to think or what to do. Rather, simply say something like, something somewhat more passive, like, well, now that when you walk by the comic book stand, you now know what Marvel comics are and who Stan Lee is. And I hope that with this knowledge, you will perhaps investigate it a little more thoroughly, right? It's kind of passive. It's not telling your audience what to do. It's not telling them what to believe or think. Okay. And that's it, guys. This is the outline. Now, one last little detail that's pretty important, and it's so important that I'm going to scroll all the way back up. I'm going to put this at the top. Okay, so for this class, I'm even underlining it. Your outline needs to be in full sentences. This means one full sentence per entry line. Okay? This is different from a keyword outline in which you would do something more like this. So here I might say, so this is, I'll just do a quick example. I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to cut it. So if I had a startling statistic here, I might say something like 90% don't know. That's a keyword outline because it's not explained. It's just 90% don't know. I have to kind of remember. It's up to me to remember what the full sentence is. So that's a keyword outline. 90%. Now, if I wrote 90% of the audience does not know who Stan Lee is a full sentence. Okay? And that would be the kind of thing that I would like for you to do. Now, of course, this is actually the full sentence outline is an in-between type of outline. The most detailed outline that you can do, which is not, again, this is not what you are to do. I'm just saying the most detailed outline to do is what we call the manuscript outline, in which case you would write out every word verbatim, blah blah blah. I don't even know. I can't even come up with. But it would full paragraphs per entry or per line. That is not what I want you to do. Do not do that. Keep it at this level of detail here. Okay, one sentence per entry, per line. That's it. All I need from you. Don't make it a manuscript. Okay. Are there any questions over outlining? We're about to move on to another thing. Go ahead and save as. Now, outlining notes. That on Blackboard when we're done. Okay. It doesn't seem like it. So what we'll do next is go over the formal speech assignment or informative speech assignment in your workbook. And it is going to be slightly different from how it is presented here, but not significantly so. There's only going to be a few things that are different. For me, that is on page 41 in your workbook. I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple seconds to turn to it. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and open a new document, or say new link. Okay. And it really doesn't seem like there are any questions so far. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive right into it. So on page 41, or at least on the informative speech assignment part of your workbook, go ahead and write this down. Locate the informative speech assignment or workbook. It kind of outlines the goals of the assignment. I think the outline format that I just went over with you will make a lot of sense when you see the goals of this assignment. So first off, the assignment is going to be worth 100 points. This speech is worth 100 points. Okay, so that is a significant chunk of your grade. Now that we're here, I can't quite. You said when the outline is due. I have missed some. Oh, Punky Deaton, that's a great question. And no, I did not. I was going to actually cover all that kind of towards the end of the broadcast. But just to answer your question now, my vision is that you'll have these outlines due or done rather by midnight next Wednesday. 7 full days from now, plus a couple hours, I guess. You should have your informative outlines done. And then, of course, right after you're done with your informative outlines, I would like for you to start recording and giving your speech. But anyway, we'll get to that, what's in your speech here in just a second. We're right on that topic now. So this speech is worth 100 points. And here are the course goals or the instructor goals that we are encouraged to give you for this assignment. The speaker, i.e. you, should develop an introduction that will get the attention of the audience, clearly introduce the topic and thesis of a presentation, enhance the credibility of the speaker, establish the importance of the topic or why the audience should listen to the speaker, and prepare the audience for the presentation by previewing the main points of the presentation. Why, golly gosh, that sounds just like the 5 jobs of the introduction we just went over on your outline. And that's why the skeletal outline sample in your workbook and the thing that I just went over is exactly formatted the way it is that we want you to do those 5 things. This is how you're going to be evaluated. So I evaluate you on each of those 5 things for this particular speech. And if you look, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So that's 5 goals. The next goal is the speaker should incorporate effective transitions which would include internal summaries and internal previews. All right. Well, guess gosh darn what's on the outline there is those exact ideas and terminology for you to try to prompt you to do that. And then finally, the speaker should prepare a conclusion that refocuses the listeners on the central idea of the presentation, which would, to me, means to review the main ideas of the presentation, creates a mood or emotional climate consistent with the goal of the presentation, which would be kind of part of the closing statement, and provides a sense of closure, which, is kind of part of what a closing statement would do. So, by gosh, golly gosh, that sounds just like what we went over on the conclusion part of the assignment. So, I do notice I didn't write any of that down on this Word document here yet, because I really just kind of want to parse out what you're probably more concerned with, which is the points it's worth, and how you're going to be evaluated. But you're evaluated on those goals or those ideas. Here are the other statistics for the assignment. Is that the time limit, and I probably misspoke the other week. And that's a problem with me and not looking things up. Is the time limit is to be between 4 to 5 minutes. Okay? So that's a minimum of 4 minutes and a maximum of 5. Now, am I going to freak out if your speech is 3 minutes and 45 seconds? No. Am I going to freak out if your speech is 5 minutes and 30 seconds? No. Am I going to freak out if your speech is 10 minutes and 17 seconds? Yep. So try to keep it reasonably between these two ideas here. Now, the workbook does go over like how many points per second, literally, that you go over, how many points are lost. I'm a little more generous in that if you go 5 minutes and 5 seconds, I'm not going to follow that scale necessarily. I'm just going to accept that it took some time for you to fiddle with the camera and turn it off at the conclusion of your speech. Okay, so don't go, don't get very, detail centered about how much time your recording is. Just do your best faith effort to stay at 4 minutes minimum, and stop yourself at 5 minutes. Okay, and of course, because this is an online class and you're recording your speeches, if you do a recording and you realize your speech is 8 minutes, you're not locked into it like a student giving their presentation in class would be. You get to realize that you went way too long, that you should re-record your speech after cutting some material. Right? So I hope that, so hopefully we won't really have that problem with your speech being over the time limit. But there we go. Time limit between 4 to 5 minutes. The outline needs to be full sentence. We already kind of talked about that. Outline, full sentence. And then here's the due date that we were looking for. Next week, Wednesday, which I do believe is the 29th. March 1st, 17 by 11:59 a.m. Ready? And you need to have, this is part of this assignment. You should have research from 3 different sources. Now, that's not 3 different types of sources. So you don't have to worry about whether it's you got a book and a magazine and a website or anything like that. You just need maybe 3 books or 3 websites or 2 books and a website or some kind of different source, right? We'll talk about how to cite those sources next week. I know I'm kind of going heavy on the details tonight. So we'll cover that at a different time, how you cite your sources and how you turn in that works cited sheet. Don't worry about that right now. Just realize that you need to find 3 different sources for your speech for you to draw upon. So anytime you're going to mention, anytime you have a subpoint, all of your subpoints should have a source associated with them. So that's why maybe you have, if you have 3 sources, you probably have one main point with 2 subpoints and another main point with just 1 subpoint. for example. You're going to do the bare minimum. There you go. Next, you also need number of citations, which is 3. Again, we will talk about that another night, next week, Wednesday. Number of citations, 3, which means that you will explicitly mention where you got your material from. All right, so we'll talk about that a different night and how to put that into your works cited. However, in your speech, let's talk about how you put it in your speech. Orally, all you need to worry about is mention the author, the publication, and the date published or accessed or copywritten. Okay, so as an example, I might say, according to, in my speech about Stan Lee, I might say something like, Stan Lee has 56 original characters to his name, according to himself, Stan Lee, in Time magazine from October 27th, 2016. And I would write that again as kind of a full sentence, probably to jog my memory. Stan Lee and Time magazine and that would be all I need for the speech. This is all you need to cite during the speech. All right. Your outlines will be a little different. They'll follow a different citation format. Again, we'll cover that on next Wednesday. But for right now, all you need is to know the author, publication, and the date. You'll notice that there is no volume number. There's no article title. There's none of that. It's just Stan Lee in Time magazine from the date. Okay? So that's all you need to know for that. For now. Now, it also says here, it says note cards. Well, if you were in a face-to-face session, yes, I would make you use note cards, but we're not. So, and it's very difficult to show you how to handle note cards. Plus, professional speakers don't really use note cards anymore. They do use things like teleprompters. So, for you all, the best practice, I think, for you would be to use your outline. So instead of the note card requirement, for us, it's going to be an outline usage requirement. Set up somewhere off camera. I don't know how we talk about it. A stand or a place where you can post up your outline so that you can see it and read from it when you need help remembering your speech. Again, there is nothing in this class where you need to actually memorize your speech. Please do not memorize your speech, in fact. Instead, use your full sentence outline. Put it somewhere off camera where you can still see it, but the audience can't, or i.e. the people watching your video can't, where you can look at it and know what's coming up next and know what topic you're on, know what your sources are, so that you can get practice reading something that's beside a camera. Since this is an online course, we're going to go ahead and practice those telecommunication skills of, well, it's kind of maybe sounds a little dishonest here, but you're going to practice those telecommunication skills of hiding your preparation. All right. I guess it's not really dishonest, but you're going to try to get that idea that I am talking, and I'm only glancing off camera for just a quick second to look at my outline. We're trying to practice that. All right, so you can get some experience with maybe if you have a teleprompter, man, that would be so awesome. But don't worry about it. Maybe you get like a any kind of. I've had people tape last semester. The only other semester I taught an online class, I had people like take a picture frame that they just happen to have, and they would tape their outline to it. Um, and so that way, the picture frame is kind of freestanding, right? So that they could just kind of post the picture frame with the outline on it off camera, um, and read from it that way. Some people were recording in their dorms, and or from an office where they had like a particle board that was on the wall, so you could kind of pin it to the particle board and set up your camera such that you can not see the particle board, but the person has a field of view so they can reference the outline, or anything kind of like that. All right, so that's your note card requirement. I don't care how big it is. I don't care how many pages your outline is. I don't care about any of that. Just have it somewhere off camera, a place where you can see it, and use your outline to help you deliver your. Now the next part is a reference list. It's going to be an APA format. Okay, and we'll talk about that next week. About this next week. I'm throwing a lot of details at you. We don't need to add APA into all of this just yet. And finally, we have something called a presentational aid, which is a visual aid the audience can see. It is optional. Okay. So if you have a poster or a picture that you want the audience to see, you can go ahead and print it out, put it on some kind of a stand or something, or maybe if you have a wealth of technology, you have one laptop where you're recording from, and you have another laptop where you can have the screen show in the camera so that you can go through a PowerPoint or whatever. That's fine, but again, all of that is optional. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, so there we go. And then finally, it says Safe Assign submission. This is a relic from when we used Safe Assign. But what it basically says, or Safe Assign submission, means turn all the written components into Blackboard. And I'm not going to make those available just yet. That's assignment submission. I'm not going to post that up for you to put there until we get closer to the actual deadline of the speeches. And the reason why is because last semester, and really even in face-to-face sections, I'll post up these assignment due dates and submission sites for people to turn stuff in, and they would do something like I would have said tonight, reference list in APA format, and one of you all will have decided that I'm going to go ahead and finish this whole thing tonight, or maybe tomorrow, and then you'd already turn in your reference list in APA format, only realizing later after I talk about AP format that you had made some kind of mistake. And then Blackboard is going to be a real punk and not let you turn in your resubmission with the corrections. And then that creates a problem for everybody because I've got to go in there and redo it. You've got to go into Blackboard and redo it. And it's just inconvenient. So what I've taken to doing in order to keep us all organized and to make sure everybody has all the information they need before they submit an assignment, and gets all of their questions answered is, you can do it whenever you want or feel comfortable, but I'm not going to make the actual submission available until it's closer to the actual due date, just so that if you make a mistake and realize it, you don't have to worry about contacting me and whether or not I'm on a debate trip, so that I can help you get your stuff ready or help you clear out your previous submission. And I hope that makes sense. It's actually, I found it more helpful as the semester went on last semester than it was inconvenient, even though it might sound inconvenient right now. But anyway, that's what it means, is to turn, for that part of the assignment, it means turn all your written components into Blackboard. All right. So that is your formal speech assignment. Again, the major points, it is worth major points rather, and you just need it to be between 4 to 5 minutes, however long that turns out to be on your outlines. Don't forget that they're going to be due next week on March 1st. Yeah. Are there any questions about this formal speech assignment? going to go ahead and give you some awkward silence moments here. I really should investigate again having that background music just playing ever so softly in the background so that I'm still here, that your screen is not frozen. Save this while I wait. Assignment. All right. Well, it's been maybe 90 seconds of a quiet, and I don't see any questions in the chat. We've had some ups and downs in terms of people watching. At one point, we had 8, and now we have 3. So, I mean, that's understandable. It's a weeknight. But anyway, I hope this was helpful for all of you. Again, as always, go ahead and ask me questions. I think I'm all caught up from your questions from last week. If this is inaccurate, please go ahead and send me the question again. So that way you can help me be accountable to you in keeping up with my correspondence. Oftentimes, if I don't answer your question within a couple of days, emailing me again is a good idea. Just in general, just to keep that in the forefront of your, keep you in the forefront of my mind. Again, I will warn you that on Friday through Sunday, so basically the whole weekend, or not basically, it is, I will be gone with the debate team again. Yes, I will, Punky Deaton, be posting these notes, including the stuff about the outlines. Thanks, that's a great question. Yes, it'll be under course content, by the way. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I'll be gone this weekend at a debate trip. So if you email me on Friday night through Sunday, I will not get to you until Sunday night, and if I'm being honest, I probably won't get to you until Monday morning. So if you do have a burning question that you don't want to ask in chat and want to email me, please email that to me as soon as possible before Friday, so that I can make sure that I get your response off post haste. Otherwise, it's going to be a few days. No worries. We're good. There's a video archive that's going to go up automatically. I don't have any control over it, but it'll be up automatically in just a few moments after I turn the broadcast off button so that you can peruse this broadcast at your leisure. That's why I like to use the YouTube service instead of the Blackboard. Blackboard does have like a video share thing like YouTube does, but it doesn't archive your broadcasts, which is irritating. Anyway, enough about Blackboard and its various problems. It looks like people are kind of filing out here, so I'm going to, I guess, file out too. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for asking your questions. Again, if you have any questions about this or anything else, let me know. These notes will be posted in the course content section of Blackboard. Again, thanks a lot, and I'll be catching you all later.